Hampshire College in Amherst has decided not to fly any flags on their campus after an American flag was burned.
In a statement to 22 News, Hampshire College's president Jonathan Lash announced neither the American flag nor any other flags will be flown on campus. This comes after the school received harsh criticism from veterans and community members over the flag that was burnt.
It is a disrespect. So, yeah, that shouldn't have happened in the first place.
Following the presidential election, the campus flag was lowered to half-staff, which offended veterans and some community members. And then someone set it on fire the night before Veterans Day. Many found the gesture to be disrespectful. Amherst has been in the spotlight due to the fact that Hampshire College is located here. In the past years, there was debate whether commemorative flags should have been flown in downtown. For more than a decade, there was a debate about flying commemorative flags on 9/11 in the center of Amherst. Last year that changed and the select board voted to fly flags annually. An Amherst College student told 22 News the flag at Hampshire College should have never been touched.
Well, to be honest, the flag shouldn't have been lowered in the first place because that just shows outright intolerance for what has happened.
President Lash said the campus will continue to consult with students and staff about appropriately utilizing flags in the future.
If this looks like a private home, that's because for most of its history it has been. But now it is used by a Muslim congregation. But the planning board locally says it wants to keep the character of this area the same, and that is the center of a controversy. In this New Jersey neighborhood, you're likely to see no shortage of American flags in front of most buildings, including homes. That's certainly true here as well, where there's also a sign in the front yard, proud to be an American. But the proud Americans here have just turned to the American judicial system regarding their house of worship. As their name on their mailbox implies, the Islamic Society of Basking Ridge owns this lot, and this house is actively used for worship. This is the building the Islamic Society wants to build here in a part of Basking Ridge, zoned for houses of worship. In fact, the proposed mosque and community center is on Church Street, named after this nearly 200-year-old Presbyterian congregation nearby. People who live and work nearby point out one of the biggest reasons the local planning board rejected the Muslim congregation's proposal after nearly 4 years and 39 hearings in which the congregation kept altering their building plans to fit the requests of the township.
On Tuesday, the United States government sued a New Jersey town, saying that it discriminated against Muslims when it rejected an Islamic group's plan to build a mosque in the town. In federal court in Newark, New Jersey, the lawsuit said after members of the public objected based on religious bias, the planning officials in Bernards Township intentionally set strict and impossible requirements for the Islamic Society of Basking Ridge. The U.S. Department of Justice lawsuit said the reasons set forth by the planning board for denying the site plan application were pretextual, and the planning board in fact denied the application based on discrimination toward Muslims.
7 Muslim men who formed a Sharia street patrol have been acquitted by a German court, which ruled they didn't break any laws against wearing political uniforms. The so-called Sharia police group first made headlines in September 2014. That was when, wearing orange vests, the men started to patrol the streets of the city of Wuppertal. They demanded that people stop drinking, stop gambling and stop listening to music. The court claimed that they could only have broken the law if the uniforms were, quote, suggestively militant or intimidating. Maximilian, if I can come to you, what do you think of the court's decision here?
The court's decision shows that the German legal system is not prepared for the new problems we have through the mass immigration of Muslims. So the court couldn't decide another way just because the laws aren't prepared on the new problems we are faced with.
Yeah, but in this particular case, they weren't actually causing any problem, weren't threatening anyone particularly. You could say it's free world, you should be able to say what you want to do, what you want to do. In fact, they were so harmless in this case, I say in inverted commas, people even mistook them for a bachelor party. I mean, was it so bad what they were doing?
I don't think that it's like a bachelor party. So imagine you go across the street and you listen to music, and then you get offended by 4 or 5 men in orange suits, and they tell you don't do that, stop it. I mean, that's very intimidating and very aggressive. But that's the point. So the German society and the legal system has no weapons to protect the liberty of the citizens. And that's a real problem, and people are very annoyed about this situation which we have in the country now.
Antonio Guterres is concerned that the wealthiest nations have been ignoring the losers of globalization as they turn toward nationalist agendas. Citing the U.S. election and the Brexit referendum vote to leave the EU, he told a conference in Lisbon that the trend has also undermined the willingness of nations to receive refugees. Guterres added the world must re-establish international protections for refugees fleeing wars, including the civil conflict in Syria. He told the conference that goal will not be easy if the wealthiest nations continue to turn toward nationalist agendas.
Some other headlines now. Problem with issuing green cards is much worse than initially believed. An audit of Citizenship and Immigration Services found thousands of green cards have gone missing. Some cards were mailed to the wrong addresses. Some were duplicates and others contained incorrect information. In some cases, immigrants approved to stay in the country for 2 years were given cards good for 10 years. The Inspector General of Homeland Security says green cards in the wrong hands could enable terrorists and other criminals to remain in the U.S.
One last one. I heard about a fashion designer who refuses to dress Melania Trump, although she had dressed Michelle Obama for a long time.
Yeah.
Won't do this.
French-born designer Sophie Thiele dressed the First Lady for the past 8 years, saying the rhetoric of racism, sexism, and xenophobia, and refusing to respect diversity and respect for all lifestyles. She's calling for a boycott. Haven't seen other designers sign up yet.
This makes me throw up. What are you talking about? Refuses to respect diversity. What are you talking about? The first foreign-born First Lady of the United States who happens to speak 5 languages?
I don't see any designers signing up for the boycott.
Yeah, hold me back, boys.
Yes, deep breath.
Deep breath, deep breath.
On Tuesday, the U.S. government said it was delaying indefinitely its proposal for how to clean up or seal off radioactive soil buried in a St. Louis area landfill adjacent to another waste site. An underground fire has been smoldering there for several years. The postponement by the Environmental Protection Agency drew an outcry from local officials angry at the potential public health hazard posed by the site. The agency cited lags in receiving technical documents needed to formulate its plan. By the end of this year, a remediation plan for the Westlake landfill in Bridgeton, Missouri, about 20 miles northeast of St. Louis, had been expected from the EPA. The agency said it decided to extend the timeline to allow for further documentation and review by experts. No new deadline was set.
Members of a landfill watchdog group have waited for years for the decision, and they're getting anxious.
Even though this record of decision is going to be delayed, hoping that it's delayed for the right reasons, because they want to get it right and they want to do a good job and they don't want to have to revisit it.
When it comes to political candidates and issues, a new study claims Google gives more liberal-leaning search results. Analysis by CanIRank.com found Google's top search result pages were 40% more likely to have a left or far left slant. The study searched for 50 politically themed keywords or phrases, and some of the results are what you would expect. Minimum wage tended to yield more liberal results, while does gun control reduce crime resulted in more conservative ones. Searches for financial regulation and Federal Reserve found mostly nonpartisan links. CanIRank used the opinions of 4 people to determine how liberal or conservative each website was. For 16% of the political search terms studied, no right-leaning results showed up at all on the first page of results. CanIRank noted this could be a problem for democracy. A different study found most people click on one of the first 5 search results. Users rarely move on to the second page. Google has denied having a liberal bias in the past. The research isn't arguing Google is trying to sway users to the left, but CanIRank's study has been one of the few to test for a bias. Another study by the University of Maryland found Google searches for Democratic presidential candidates led to more supportive websites than searches for Republican candidates.
Donald Trump met with top executives and anchors from several TV news networks Monday. This type of meeting isn't uncommon, but apparently there were some fireworks. According to multiple people who attended the off-the-record gathering at Trump Tower in New York, the president-elect used the opportunity to call out the network's unfair and dishonest coverage of him. But while many focused solely on the grievances Trump aired about the media, several attendees said the meeting was actually pretty productive. One participant told Politico that Trump said he wants to reframe his relationship with the media into one that's cordial and productive, and all he wants is fairness in any news coverage of him. Trump has had a tumultuous relationship with the media, especially during his presidential campaign.
They are the lowest form of humanity.
It's still unclear if Trump will give the media the same level of access that past presidents have once he takes office. He has yet to hold an official press conference since being elected.
First Brexit, then Trump, and now France could be in for a political shake-up. Outsider candidate Francois Fillon has come out on top in the Republican Party's primaries as it seeks to nominate a candidate for the country's 2017 presidential election.
No one predicted that the center-right French conservative Francois Fillon would get this far.
François Fillon, l'outsider devenu le favori de la primaire de la droite et du centre. Il est arrivé largement en tête du premier tour hier.
Meanwhile, it came as a big surprise that Fillon, who served Sarkozy as prime minister, should win the first round with more than 44% of the vote.
Kicking the former President Sarkozy, who happens to be his ex-boss, out of the polls in the presidential Republican primaries. Who is he? Well, labeled an outsider in this contest and a political has-been. Now, the mainstream French polls never favored him. Wait a minute. Now, doesn't that remind you of something? Perhaps of a few other political earthquakes of the year? Trump and Brexit. Now, in both of these cases, the mainstream media was sure there would be a completely different outcome.
We shouldn't talk about sure winners, which have been designated sure winners by mainstream media. Because if there's one element that we have to learn about the last elections and referendums, all the information which has been given by the mainstream media is at the end totally wrong. And when I say totally, I'm saying that we're talking about 98% of the mainstream media, which were saying that Clinton is going to win, for example, or that Brexit will never win. The mainstream media is not journalism, but politics.
President Vladimir Putin has warned that Russia could take countermeasures if it felt threatened by NATO. Putin issued the warning in an interview with US filmmaker Oliver Stone for the Igor Lapatanak-directed documentary Ukraine on Fire. It's a film that's described as revealing the historical premise of the ongoing Ukrainian crisis, its current political backstage, and its dangerous potential for the world. Oliver Stone is credited as executive producer and having conducted interviews.
Членам НАТО ей уже очень трудно сопротивляться давлению со стороны такой крупной страны-лидера НАТО, как США. И там легко может появиться все, что угодно. Система противоракетной обороны, и новые базы, и если потребуются, и новые ударные комплексы. А нам что делать? Мы должны в этой связи предпринимать контрмеры, то есть ставить под удар наших ракетных систем те объекты, которые, по нашему мнению, начинают нам угрожать. Ситуация напрягает.
Do you think the troop buildup near Russia and the defense system near Russia helped lower tensions with Russia?
Again, NATO's a defensive alliance, always has been. There's no reason for anybody in Russia to feel threatened by NATO's military activities or preparations.
It has emerged that Japan scrambled a fighter jet to a group of disputed islands in the East China Sea after a Russian patrol chopper was spotted flying over the area. Japan's defense ministry reported on Wednesday that the Russian helicopter had flown over two of the Senkaku Islands for a number of hours the previous day. The chopper went as close as 10 kilometers to Japan's airspace, but eventually landed on a Russian destroyer that was sailing around the islands. In June, a Russian naval vessel sailed in a zone bordering the islands, but this is the first time a helicopter has flown over the area. The Japanese government bought 3 of the islands in 2012, but they are still the subject of an ongoing territorial dispute between Japan and China.
On Israel's coast, a roughly 3,000-year-old cemetery is providing a look at burial practices of a mysterious population that battled the Israelites in the Old Testament. The remains of 227 Philistines, whose geographic origins remain unknown, have been uncovered in Ashkelon Cemetery. Archaeologist and excavation director Adam Aya of the Harvard Semitic Museum has estimated that approximately 1,200 individuals, ranging from infants to older adults, were interred there over a span of about 100 years. Aya said November 18th at the annual meeting of the American Schools of Oriental Research, "For the first time, we have found a formal Philistine cemetery."
A late-season storm in the Caribbean has been upgraded to a hurricane as authorities in Panama reported at least 4 people had been killed and several were missing. Heavy rains have triggered landslides, trapping some beneath the mud. A child was killed when a tree fell on a car parked outside a school in the capital Panama City.
I was shook up and broken, and I couldn't even go and look in the deep freezers right away because my heart couldn't take it. They had taken all the turkeys and all the stuff that I was going to prepare for the Thanksgiving meal. People started calling, seeing what they can do to help me continue on to make the meal a success. I've never seen nothing like it. Let me just put it that way. The overflow, the outpour of love, the outpour of encouragement. I did not realize so many people knew what we were doing here on Pace Boulevard. I knew a few people heard of us, but I did not realize the many people that knew what we were doing, and it's just been an encouragement.